chat about anything that you guys want to hear. How many of y'all heard Meb speak a little bit earlier today? Yeah, so he's true inspiration. I mean, just what he's been through. I heard him this morning, but couldn't come this afternoon. But I'm sure there's a very similar message about, you know, what he's come through from his background. So if you believe you can get out of a bad place and have a good future and good health for you and your family, it's possible. So I think this is something. Why don't everyone just stand up a minute? So for this talk here, this is the prerequisite. So what did Meb do at the finish line of the marathon in Rio? A couple push-ups, right? And it kind of lightened everyone up. And Ron did this morning with Meb. So before this talk, we are going to do 5 push-ups, okay? Yeah, you have a baby on you, all right? So if you can do it, we're all going to get down and do 5 push-ups, okay? And if we can't do 5 push-ups, you probably have no business running tomorrow. I'm going to do them with you. All right, 5 push-ups. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Now, I see in the Air Force, a lot of people do. How many of y'all are still active duty or reserves? Okay, most people do push-ups wrong. So this is not 5 yet. So this is just like extra garbage. So what is the proper arm position, shoulder position for a push-up if you're in the military and you don't want to trash your shoulder in a 20-year career? I'm not talking about passing your PT test. I mean, that's what it is, but I don't want you to trash your shoulders. Yeah, so proper push-up. So this is how most people do the push-ups. Texting, typing, is this good? Where's our strength? It's a press. Okay, so proper push-up, forearms perpendicular, press, okay? So that's how I want you guys. And do we do push-ups with like saggy butt? No. Push-ups like this? No. So should be a nice, I'll show you a proper push-up. Meb did it right at the finish line. He was right on. Proper push-up. Thumbs are forward, fingers are out. You should be able to talk and breathe. Press up. All right, got it? Everyone's going to do good push-ups. Do some push-ups every day. And that's why Meb said he did the push-ups. This morning he talked about how him and his dad would do push-up contests at night. So somehow that was wired in his brain. That's just wild. So he falls down at the end of the Olympic marathon. That shows you how powerful maybe, you know, if you're a parent, your influence on your children is with just your health behavior. So that's just wild. I can't imagine like somehow like in a 0.001 second at the finish line of the Olympics when you fall on the ground, something that your father like imprinted in your brain came to the surface and you did it. So I don't know how that happened, but so I'm a dad and maybe the best thing I can do is just try to set a good example for them and, you know, have fun out there. So how many of y'all here are doing some type of event tomorrow? Cool. Let's just get a kind of a show of hands. How many are actually doing the full Monty, full marathon? Right on. Any first time? First time marathon. Good. Feel good? Not nervous at all? Good. Well, it's good to be a little bit nervous. How many half marathoners? Good. 10K? Anyone going to hop into the 5K as a warm-up tonight? You're going to hop on in at 6 o'clock? Good. Anyone doing that? It's like the dopey challenge, the 5K, 10K, get that done and then finish and then do the half marathon? So you're going to do the 10K tomorrow? Did that? That's probably harder than the marathon because you got to finish, you come back to the barn, right? It's like a horse. Now I'm back at the barn, right? They have the donuts over there, the pizza, and then like, do I got to really go run a half? Once you're out on the marathon course, there's only one way home, right? Once you start out along the flight line, how many of y'all have done the marathon before? Once you're like out past that far, I mean, there is only one way home. There's no bus. So yeah, get to that point in the marathon. Now, one little thing of advice before we informally start here. Yesterday, talked about like, what do you do tonight just like one simple thing to do tonight to not screw tomorrow up. And it's called the Invisible Man. Anyone know what the Invisible Man is? So Logan, what's the Invisible Man?
Lay out all your clothes and all your stuff like it's ready to go.
Yeah, lay all stuff out like it's ready to go. You know, whatever. And tomorrow it might rain, so maybe add a trash liner to that. You know, so just have a contingency for, you know, if you're hanging out for like an hour before the start to stay dry. So have your Invisible Man that you're going to run in the rain with something so you don't get all like soaking wet and freezing, you know, before the start. But we talked about that for about 30 seconds yesterday. And a lady who was sitting back in that back corner who was very nervous, it was her first half marathon, she had all these great questions about what to do. And she went up home last night and did the Invisible Man. She drove from, I think it was St. Louis, and she didn't have her shoes. And she was like, and luckily she got a pair at Roederer, which was the same ones. So she's lucky she did. She was paranoid enough to do the Invisible Man 2 nights before. But could imagine her stress, like tonight, she gets home from dinner, it's like 10 o'clock. She's trained for 6 months to do the half marathon. And she lays out the Invisible Man and can't find her shoes. And then she like goes and looks at her rental car and they're not there. And she'd be like freaking out. So maybe like go home tonight right away. Make sure you got your shoes because this closes at 7 o'clock. Because then you're probably, you know, out of luck if you don't have your shoes tonight. So does everyone have their shoes? But you know, you really don't need shoes to run this tomorrow. You probably could do it barefoot, honestly. I'm going to wear shoes tomorrow, or maybe sandals, I'm not quite sure. But, you know, that's your worst case scenario. Take your shoes off and just do it anyway. But I want to welcome you, and if you want to, you know, come a little closer here, you know, so maybe what we'll do here is talk a little bit. You know, I know tonight probably what's most on your mind is maybe a little bit of strategy of what to do tomorrow without getting too complicated. I don't want to get you all like worried or changing your strategy, but maybe like here's a couple like knucklehead moves not to do. You know, maybe a couple things maybe you're not thinking about, but just not to do. Maybe, you know, I'm 50 years old or a few weeks shy of 50. Maybe we can do some things with just healthy aging, you know, because I think one of the things I want to teach people as a physician. And I gave a talk over at Boeing about an hour and a half ago, and these are all like really smart people over there, way smarter than, I'm like a doctor from West Virginia. These are all like engineer rocket scientist people. So they want to know what's going on under the hood, right? So they know that if they stay healthy, they can run. And we spoke mostly about nutrition because the average age of the folks in the room there were about 50. These are all like their senior engineering people, many retired military. And things weren't working as well for them at age 50 as it was at age 30. So we talked a lot about the fuel they put in their mouths. Because a lot of runners, they work on the engine, right? I go train every day. Maybe they work on the chassis. You know, I'm going to go to the gym, do my strength training. You got to do strength training as you get older. You know, and then maybe they work on like a plane. Think of a plane. I'm a flight doc, you know, so say a C-17. So I kind of hiccuped and I said, like, let's pretend you're a C-5 and that's not a Boeing plane. So I got in trouble there. So a C-17 is a Boeing plane. Okay, let's reset that. And then I said, well, maybe an F-16. And I was like, no, that's not a Boeing plane. F-15 is a Boeing plane. Okay, so F-15 is a Boeing plane. Got to have a good engine, right? Pratt Whitney, whatever the thing is, Northrop Grumman turbine engine. Good chassis, right? If you got a strong engine but a really weak frame, what's going to happen? Break, right? Get an injury. Now, what if you got that, but the thing doesn't move well in the air? You know, you don't have a good movement pattern. Is that going to work? So do any of y'all pay any attention to how you move, your skill of running, landing soft? Anyone? Because that's important. Yeah, if you want to run for the long haul, there is a skill to running. You know, it's not rocket science stuff. It's like watch any kid run around here. And the kids exhibit what when they run? Do they run with thuds, or do they run with kind of a nice springiness? They have spring in their step. And so I want you to make sure as you age, you're running with spring. The body is the shock absorber, okay? Not the shoe. The body is the shock absorber. So your shoe is an interface between the ground, and I certainly think there's horrible shoes and shoes that complement normal mechanics, i.e. flat. Shoe should be flat. A shoe should not be super soft, because if you land on a marshmallow, is that a good thing? No. Should a shoe be light? Yeah. Flexible? Yeah. I mean, the best, think of like the ideal children's shoe. You know, it should be flexible, should be flat, should be light, and they love it. And you put a big thick thing on a kid's foot, and they don't like it. So we don't just outgrow being kids. We're basically like big kids. You know, so that's probably enough on the shoes. So now we could talk a little more later if you have some specific questions, but don't change your shoes tomorrow. Now, one mistake you could make that I'm going to try to get you to avoid, if you've been wearing a training shoe that's pretty structured, with a little more cushion, and it's a marathon, and someone says, well, wear some really light shoe. No cushion, no protection, it's a marathon, you want to have the lightest thing on your foot. But your foot's going to behave different. Does that sound like a good idea for a marathon? Negative. Yeah, so do not do that. That will not pay you dividends because your body's adapted to what you've been running in. You know, so maybe a mile you could get away with that, but do not chuck your shoes and buy something here at the Expo that's like paper thin and think it's going to help you for a marathon. So, all right, so then like you got this plane, and what's probably the most important thing about the plane year after year? Outside of the engine, the chassis, and the way it moves. What do you, maintenance? Of course, yeah, do the maintenance every day. I roll every day. Get good light sleep is maintenance. Your body's repair systems, you know, happen with recovery. So you get, how many believe you get better in training, or how many believe you get better in recovery? How many would say we get better when we train? How many say when we recover? Yeah, so we got to know how to recover. So then the last part, so part of recovery is what do you got to put in that plane every day? Fuel. Yeah, so as you get older, you can't get away with the same things too. So you got to put healthy fuel in your body every day. And I want to give a huge shout out to a friend here, Ron Allison. So Ron, stand up. And not to put you on the spot, but Ron is putting healthy fuel in his body. And he's going to run the half marathon tomorrow. And he's going to do Marine Corps marathon in 6 weeks. And 16 months ago, is that when you started? 18 months ago, something, and maybe you could tell, something made Ron decide, I need to change what I put in my body. And you see right now he's, you know, probably 106, $160. So he's half his size as he was 18 months ago. Half his weight. And he's doing it not by depriving himself of things, restricting himself of things. He's not doing that by over-exercising. He's doing that by figuring out the metabolism of his body. But what made you wake up one day 18 months ago and say, was it your kids or what was it? I mean, because yeah, you learn from someone like Ron, like what made him say, I want to be a healthy human?
So really it was two things. The first thing was my family was always overweight, and my father passed away 2 years before due to abdominal hernia. So that was a big wake up, but it was 2 years after that. I was at home, my wife was at work, it was about 1 in the morning. I was just sitting there kind of chilling out, and these guys were in bed. This guy wasn't here yet, and it just hit me. It's like, you know, as emotionally stable as I was when he passed away, and how much it got to me, I thought, you know what, if I can keep that from happening to them, then I'm going to. And started talking to my family doctor, and then made some connections. Here I am.
Cool. And Ron knows that the changes he's made in his lifestyle, this is not like an 18-month temporary change that's just like, okay, I did that, now I can go back. So can you go back to the way it was, or you, no? So it's kind of, it's not an option, it's a non-option. It's like holding a beach ball underwater, you can't let go. Yeah, so primarily one of the principles, Ron and his family has what's called insulin resistance. It's the way his body stores sugar. You know, he wasn't lazy. Look, he's got 3 kids. You know, he wasn't overeating by choice. You know, that just doesn't happen. So his body is driving him to want to eat by what his body's doing with the sugar, packaging it. So what have you rid? Just what are the most basic things you have rid, like you'll never look at again in your diet? Soda, off the table. Candy, sugar, yeah. So just wonder, like, just for the audience here, because we're all heading in that direction, you know, just when it's coming.
So my typical is low carb, low sugar. One of the big things though that I've come to realize, and I don't eat now how I did when I first started. It's been a process getting there, but the hidden sugars. You know, there's a list of, I believe it's about 66 sugars that just because it doesn't, something says it's low in sugar, it doesn't have sugar on there, or fat-free, the sugar's still in there. So it's, you know, informing yourself on that, the low carb, and doing exactly what I was taught growing up in school not to do, high fat. You know, I take a high fat diet, healthy fats. I start the morning with coconut oil every day, butter. I use real butter, cream, heavy whipping cream, but eliminate the sugar from that. So it's everything that I was taught not to do, what I do, and the difference, so obvious difference here, but the difference in the feeling. I would never recommend this before a race, but I can go get 4 or 5 hours sleep and wake up and feel great. Now, I don't do that, try not to do that, but I can. I just feel wonderful doing it. And then the days when maybe I have slipped up, you can tell the difference right away. And so when you ask, you know, the underwater beach ball, I love that analogy. That's why it's so easy not to go back, because that day you do slip, which happens, you feel horrible. I mean, you just instantly feel horrendous. And then being insulin resistant, if it's 1 or 2 days, I can immediately feel the weight coming right back on. I mean, my pants right here will start getting tight on one of those. I mean, that quick. But I realize, like, okay, time to switch back, chill out. But there's certain things, candy pop, I don't touch. I haven't had a Coke in 2 years, almost 2 years, I think. So, yep.
Oh, well, good for
a lot of water. And I think Mark's going to talk high fat.
Yeah, I mean, so really simple. So, I mean, I'm a doc. Everything, I'd probably say 80% of what I learned in medical school was wrong. Just trying to figure out what was right. But that's the normal cycle of science. Every 5 years, things change. So we just have to, if things aren't working, and they're not working for society or the world, then we have to re-look at things. So eating fat doesn't make you fat if it's healthy fat. You know, eating low fat doesn't make you healthy if you have what the majority of people have in the country. So 70% of our country now is either obese, overweight, pre-diabetic, or diabetic. So this isn't the minority, it's the majority. So as you get older, you know, so all of this, you need to eat all these sugars and carbs and all this stuff to run these half marathons. If you're like 18 or 20, that's probably working for you. But if you're older and that's not working for you well, don't keep persisting that it will, because it won't. So this morning I had eggs and bacon. Tonight I'll have a big salad, maybe a little teeny bit of pasta. And tomorrow morning I won't be eating a lot of carbohydrates. Because let's talk about the physiology tomorrow morning, whether you're running a marathon or half marathon. So I don't want you to, like, if you have your regular meal pattern that's worked for you, don't change things. But I'm going to tell you one hint, that just don't do this tomorrow morning unless you know this has helped you. But most people it doesn't, and they're trying to figure out why. So like a half hour or hour before a half or a full, you know, some folks may say, well, take some extra sugar, drink some Gatorade, take a bagel, take a couple gels, like a half hour or an hour before, right before the race. Have you heard that before? Top the tank off. All right, does that sound like a good idea? Like, oh, maybe, I don't know. So our bodies release a hormone in response to sugar. This is the way it is. So if marathon starts 7:30 tomorrow, at 6:30, if I said, let me have 3 gels, a thing of Gatorade, and a half a bagel or something, you know, I put 100 grams of carbohydrates in my body. What's my body going to release to store those carbohydrates? It's a hormone. Ron was talking about it. It's called insulin. Okay, so insulin is going to rise to try to store that carbohydrate. Okay, that's just what it does. It's going to store it in muscles and liver if you're insulin sensitive, or it's going to store it as fat if you have insulin resistance. So it's a marathon, right? Or even a half marathon. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, depending on how long you're going to be out there. So even the most elite Kenyan marathoner, how much sugar can they store in their muscles and liver? If you look at just time, maybe. Yeah, hour and a half maybe, they can store. So I don't think any of us, unless you're doing the 10K, are going to be done in an hour and a half. So if you're going to start one of these events, start a marathon, start a half, do you want to be burning sugar early or do you want to be burning more fat early in the race? Yeah, you want to be burning fat. Yeah, the fat that's on you. I mean, it's a long race. So one of the non-negotiables of all of this is that when insulin levels are high, insulin inhibits our body's ability to use the fat. Okay? Does that make sense? So it's like you can't, it blocks it. So if you take all this sugar right away and you start running, you might think you're running an easy pace by your Garmin, but you've kind of sabotaged your body. You've shut off fat burning. So you've kind of put yourself in a hole without realizing it. So just resist the temptation to do that. So maybe if you're going to have a little carbish meal, maybe a bagel with some nut butter on it, have that maybe 2 or 3 hours beforehand, not 30 minutes beforehand. Okay? Now, once you're running, your body has what are called insulin-independent pathways of transporting carbohydrate. Blah, blah, blah. Your body can use that sugar once you're running. Once you're running and moving, a different pathway kicks in. So once you're running and moving, you get to that, I haven't looked that close on the course. There's plenty of food on the course. I think the first food type station is 7 miles. Does anyone know on the marathon course? I think 7 miles. Somewhere around there's like a gel station. And there's Gatorade at the stations. Once you're about a half hour in, you don't need to have a lot. At that point, you can take a little bit of sugar, and that's fine. And what that really does, it more kind of keeps your brain happy than does anything so much for your muscles or your liver. So one of the things I'm going to convince you right now is, because if you're convinced something's going to happen, and if during the race if you think it's starting to happen, what's going to happen? So if you think you're going to bonk, or you think you might bonk, and you get some clue in the brain that, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm bonking, what's going to happen? You're going to bonk, right? Now, if you tell yourself, look, this bonking thing is a hogwash. All of you have enough fuel on your body to run from here back to West Virginia. You will not bonk. Now, something else could go wrong, but it's not going to be a lack of energy on your body. What are your odds of running out of energy if you believe you're not going to run out of energy? Like 0, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you sense you're a little bit low on sugar, that's your brain trying to not make you die. So your brain is tightly regulated. So if you're constantly like taking lots of high concentrated sugar in these events, your sugar's like going like this. And you get a little bit, your brain's trying to figure out what's going on. So certainly if your brain's trying to figure out what's going on, how many of you, walk during a marathon? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, slow down, walk, stretch it out. Get your heart rate down, walk through the aid station, take a sip of something. But you'll come back, you'll be okay, you'll recover. Trust me, it happens. How many of you expect to have some kind of a bad patch out there? Yeah, it's normal. I've run about 130 marathons. And I do it because I like it. And I learned something from every single one of those. And last year's Air Force Marathon was my slowest marathon ever out of the 130. It was like 2:57-ish. And it was kind of windy. I was sucking it the last few miles. I just wanted to get home. So, I've prided myself that, I've worked on a lot of the mental part to get out of bad patches. You never just like, this sucks today, I'm just going to tank it. But you prepare yourself mentally and physiologically in how you pace yourself. And again, I don't know how tomorrow's going to go. I'm lining up with y'all too. If I play it smart, mellow in the beginning, don't eat a bagel 30 minutes before the start, don't get hit by lightning, if that's happening, it'll all work out okay. So your brain is really powerful tomorrow. So have a strategy to get out of, some kind of bad patch. And most of it comes from believing, you're gonna do fine. Walk a little, belly breathe. Belly breathing is powerful because what does belly breathing do? If we're sensing we're in stress, maybe you're in the last 3 or 4 miles. I think in both the full and the half because the courses merge. It's pretty hilly, right? Yeah, so you're like, I just want to get rid of this hill. So you go up that hill a little too quick because you just want that hill done with. And then at the top of the hill, you're breathing a little quick, right? And you're like, man, maybe I shouldn't have done that. What are you going to do at the top of that hill? Are you going to panic and breathe faster? Hyperventilate? What's that going to do if you hyperventilate? That's going to really mess you up in many ways. For one, it's going to kick off your adrenaline. It's going to kick off your heart rate, kick that up. And it'll also, when we overbreathe, this is a secret weapon you can even practice in the early miles tomorrow. When you slow your breathing down, what's called carbon dioxide rises a little bit in our blood level. And carbon dioxide controls how much oxygen gets to our working muscles and our brain. So how many of y'all have experienced this? You know, if you've, for whatever reason, you did it as a school experiment. I want to try to make myself pass out. So what do? You breathe really fast, right? You blow off carbon dioxide, you get kind of lightheaded, you're not getting the oxygen in your brain. Now, if you wanted to meditate and figure something out, what are you going to do to your breathing? Slow it down, right? If you had a heart rate monitor on, like if you had a real-time heart rate monitor on, and if you're like, okay, I'm going to make my pulse go from 60 to 40, and you can do that, what you're going to do is you're going to find a peaceful place. All the way out. Fill the belly. Now, if you watch Meb run in some of those still pictures, you know, he's under a lot of stress, right? His body's under physical stress, and he's running like 440 pace under stress. But if you look at his body posture, so tomorrow if you feel under stress, get yourself in a good posture. Just if you're like this, you can't use your diaphragm. You see people going up the hill. All right, it ain't going to work. So victory, right? Like the Rolls-Royce angel wings, right? Get yourself in a good posture. Full exhalation. Slow your breathing down. Get it all back. Okay, so if you find yourself in this toilet bowl of doom, it's self-fulfilling. Because what happens if your body's in this position? Is your body responsive to the ground, or is it like a hacky sack? If you're like in this position. Yeah, you're like a hacky sack, right? You're like thud, and you feel it. But then if you get your body upright again, you know you're back to springing. Shorten your stride, relax your breathing, slow your heart rate down, and you'll recover. So the art of doing all of these half marathons and full marathons isn't so much, you know, how fast you can run, it's how good you can recover from a little bit of a trouble spot. How many of you all have, like in training, you know, I mean, that's why you train, right? Like you've had some kind of run and things didn't go right and you did a few things and you got out of it and you recovered. Cool, so go back to those, you know, whatever your strategy is might be different than someone else. But, you know, write something on your hand as a cue. You know, unless it's ingrained in your brain. When I was starting to really focus just on breathing as really my cue to, if I'm in a bad, you know, it's breathe and relax, right? I mean, until the only time you're not totally relaxing in this race is when you take that last turn and you see the finish and those planes are there. Other than that, you know, you can only go faster by relaxing. So sometimes I used to write like a big B on my hand with a Sharpie. And that just, you know, because you're always like looking at your, you know, something, it cued me to breathe. So think about writing something like that. Another way to make sure you're relaxed, I don't wear a watch when I run these races because I want to go by sense. Now tomorrow, how many of y'all are marathoners here doing the marathon? First 2 miles are uphill, right? What are going to be the slowest 2 miles of your race tomorrow? The first 2 miles. Trust me, unless you tank, so you want your first 2 miles tomorrow to be your 2 slowest miles. And if you're, you know, got one of those little pace charts that's on your wrist and you want to run 3:27, and it's like 8 minutes a mile or something, and it's like you should be at 16 minutes at 2 miles, and you're running up that hill thinking you need to hit that, what did you just do to your race? You just totally destroys your race. And maybe not so. You can always recover, but you got yourself into a hole. Because when you're running really hard in the beginning, you're using up all the sugar. Your body's like a hybrid type engine, meaning there's this line where you're shifting from gas to electric. Electric is fat, gas is sugar. Go a little too fast, and what's the engine switch to? Gas, which is sugar, and you don't feel it early on. So resist that temptation. So please, please, please don't look at your watch those first 2 miles, or if you do, add a minute to what like your pace should be, and that's cool. That means you're going to get that back later. Like around the flight line, you're just cruising. No turns. You know, you're going to get that minute back because you got like 24 miles to get that time back. That's a lot of time. So those are just a couple really simple things I think to think about tomorrow, but I can open it up. We're at 5:30 here, and I know people want to get to the pasta dinner. You know, I'll answer some questions, or, you know, folks want me to answer a few more things about nutrition or training. You know, I'm glad to do that, but I want to kind of just address kind of your needs here today. Anyone have anything about the race or any question at all? Yes? Yeah, so the question, does the slope of the road affect, you know, your gait or how you run? I think it does a little bit. This one actually, most of the roads are really flat because most of the roads are closed. So around the flight line, you can run on the road. It's closed. So don't run on the shoulder. I mean, you can run like right on the yellow line, you know, so right in the middle. Yeah, and actually the way they have the roads closed is you could run on either side, even if it's cambered a little bit. So you could run a mile on this side of the yellow line, run a mile on this side of the yellow line, you know, mix it up. The only place you're really just on one side is when you're crossing a couple of those highway overpasses. But otherwise, you can mix it up. Yeah, just mix it up. So what will I eat? What will I eat for breakfast? I'll have a little nut butter, and I have a drink called Cucuzella. And that's what Meb uses too. It's a very slow release. It has some protein, but it's got some very slow release carbohydrate that doesn't spike the insulin. You know, I'll have a little of that about 2 hours before, and another little hit of that about 30 minutes. But it's not like Gatorade. It doesn't spike the sugar. Slow release. But then once I'm on the course, I'll take what's out there, but just not a lot. You know, I'll just sense kind of what I need. I might take 2 gels during the race, and maybe a sip or 2 of Gatorade at every aid station just to get a little sugar, mostly just for the brain. But that's, yeah, I'll kind of sense it, but don't. And then on the drinking, so, you know, it depends on how the day's going to go. One of the biggest risks that you can have if you're out there 4 or 5 hours is over drinking. Okay? So none of you tomorrow will die of dehydration. Okay, you will not dehydrate yourself, because if you've gotten yourself so dehydrated that you're going to cause medical harm, what symptom are you probably going to have? You're going to be like, I mean, you're going out for a hike on a weekend, and when you get a little dehydrated, what do you feel? Thirsty, right? So your thirst mechanism protects you from going into any immediate harm. So if you're thirsty out there, drink. So you will not dehydrate. But there is a condition called overhydration. You know, it's in your race packet, but most people, it's like the warning on the airplane about, you know, put the oxygen mask on and where the exits are and, you know, all that stuff. But so if you have free water, this course actually probably has too much water for someone who's going slow that doesn't understand to keep some salt in the system. Because there's actually like an aid station almost every mile. So if you're walking and you're out there 5 or 6 miles, you could put yourself in a position to drink too much water. So too much free water is not good. All right, I would expect everyone out there tomorrow in the full marathon to lose at least 4% of their body weight and be immediately fine, because your glycogen attaches to water. So just by using your fuel, you're going to lose some water. And you might dehydrate a little bit. And that's okay, because after the race, where are you headed if you're with me? I'm heading to the beer tent. I'll have a beer, you know, with some salty pizza maybe. I mean, I'll have a little carb because I just ran 26 miles, you know, with extra pepperoni and take the extra crust off. But I mean, you know, heck yeah, just then go to the airport. So, you know, then tomorrow's a new day, you know, after that. But yeah, so don't overdrink. If you are someone, you should know your sweat rate if you're a heavy sweater, because if you're out there 6 hours, you may need to have a little sodium with you. So that's something I hope you've played with a little bit, but just caution. So I think even some of the aid stations have some salty stuff out there, like some of the later aid stations. Some of them will have like pretzels and things like that. So if you're thirsty, get some salt in you too. You know, or that, you know, I know there's little salt packs some people bring, but don't be afraid to add a little salt. But that's only really relevant if you're going to be out there like 4, 5, 6 hours. Half marathoners, you're not going to overdrink in a half marathon. It's people out there, you know, and it took a lot of people having, you know, I mean, no kidding, even dying of this condition before the industry started to acknowledge that, okay, this is a problem. And now, how many of y'all have heard of that condition, or you get, yeah, I mean, you get these things. So don't need to overthink it, just don't overdrink. You know, follow your thirst mechanisms. You definitely on this course do not need to carry water with you. All right, so you do not need to carry a belt of water. There is plenty of water out there. I mean, I think there's like an aid station pretty much like every mile, which is good for more, you know, because there's like bands, which is fun, right? So go to every aid station, listen to the band, but don't necessarily drink water at every aid station. At the aid stations, yeah, they got little cups. Yeah, maybe some of the later ones have little, like, you know, little bottles like that or something, but they're cups. So it's kind of good. Stop. If you're thirsty, actually drink. Drink one, you know, put it in the trash receptacle. Have a little hit of Gatorade if you want. Don't drink like 2 Gatorade things. You don't need that. Sometimes just a little sugar helps you get to the next one. But, you know, practice things that, I mean, do things you've done in your training. So that's why, like, when people decide on race day, I mean, no one in a long 3-hour training run on a weekend has drank 2 cups of water every mile. Right? Have any of y'all ever done that on your training runs? Because you couldn't, right? I mean, like, you go out on the trail and you run, and there may be a fountain. You know, like if you're here, you know, there might be a fountain every 4 miles if you're lucky. And you actually make your summer route. Okay, here's a gas station. You know, here's a fountain, and you space them out, and maybe carry like some little bottle between. Now, if it is hot, what's the smartest thing to do with the water? If it's hot, dump it on your head. I don't know what the relative humidity is going to be tomorrow, but if it is low enough humidity, that's how you cool yourself. And it was fun. A guy came over to the booth today who showed me, he had Galen Rupp's hat from the Olympic trials. You know, Galen Rupp won the won the bronze medal in the marathon in his second marathon. And him and Alberto Salazar, they have everything dialed down to the .011, you know, some fraction of a performance enhancer. So if you watched it on TV, he was changing hats at every aid station. And people were saying he must be doing that because the new hat's lighter. Why do you think he was changing hats at every aid station? What was in his hat? No, what was in the hat the new hat that he put on his head? Ice. So he had, smart guy, right? So he must have had some really good handlers to keep the hat cold. But he had like a mesh in the hat, so the ice was in the hat, but when he put it on, it didn't all just fall out. So it kind of gave him, I mean, think about that. That is awesome. So like every 3 miles, he's getting this ice hat that's giving him this drip ice bath. That was probably why he won the bronze medal. I mean, because when your brain senses your core temperature's heating up, what does your brain do? It starts to shut you down. And no kidding, he like ran strong till the end. You know, and yeah, so I mean, that's not that y'all, but take if it's cold, yeah, put it you won't need sunscreen tomorrow. That's another way to sabotage your cooling because it beads up the sweat. No sunscreen, all right? It's okay, trust me. You won't have any. It's 7:30 in the morning. You're not going to get a sunburn. But any other, we'll probably end here in a few minutes to let you guys kind of get over to meal or dinner. But any other questions people got on anything I can share some experience or opinion, which will probably be debunked as all being wrong in 5 years, but that's okay. Yes? So she loses her appetite. So that may work to your advantage based on what we talked about. Because is the fuel you're going to use tomorrow what you're going to eat tonight? Or is the fuel like on your body that you're going to use tomorrow? It's really on your body. And it's in your training. Who do you think has convinced us that running a marathon is all about like 3-day fueling strategy? Why are you going to finish this marathon tomorrow? Does it have anything to do with fuel? Or what does it have to do with? You're training, right? You trained for it. So your body has developed what's called an aerobic capacity, which is the ability to take the oxygen in the air and create ATP. So these 6 months, hopefully at least a week of training that you've done, you've built this large aerobic capacity. So think about it like this. Tomorrow is the final lap. If you got to the finish, if you get to the starting line tomorrow healthy, which hopefully you have, you are done. Just don't, tomorrow's the fun. I mean, how many people have trained at least a couple months for this? Yeah, how many have trained like 4 months? Heck yeah, I mean, so think of how many miles. So even if it's 26 miles, it is still the last lap, right? You've trained, a long time. Yeah, so if you don't have an appetite, just take something easy that's easy on your stomach. And then when you're out there running tomorrow, if you feel a little hungry, take some gels. But definitely don't force any, because really what you put in your body tomorrow morning, and even tonight, is not going to make that big a deal if you pace yourself right. How you pace yourself, way more important than tonight's dinner. It's the people that sell products want to convince you it's all about like what new fancy. Now one thing I think is curious, because I think there is some validity to this, how many of y'all have suffered just from these little cramps, these spazzy cramps? So there's this stuff out now, which, is old school, that you probably have in your cabinet, and the pickles are in it. It's called pickle juice. So people that are prone to these cramps, and I wouldn't recommend you just go try this if you don't have this problem, but if you always cramp, it's probably not going to do you harm. That would be the one thing I'd say is probably a safe race day experiment if every time you run a race you get a cramp. Because what do you got to lose? Because you're probably going to get cramps. And we don't even know what the true definition of what that is. Stitches, people that get these cramps here, they just need to breathe through their diaphragm. But people get these different types of cramps. And I think there is some real science to that and what this pickle juice does to the neuromuscular junction. Has anyone heard that or played with pickle juice a little bit? Yeah, and you don't need to buy the pickle juice product that costs $10. You can go to the Kroger and get a big thing of pickles, eat the pickles because they're good salt, but then save the juice. And maybe you take a little pickle juice, and if you have a friend out there on the route, you'd put a little pickle juice in a flask, and you'd have some pickle juice, because it's got a little salt in it. Anyone tried pickle juice? And did you use it for that purpose?
I haven't used it like during the race, but
Okay. So there's an N of 1. It seems to help. So the science is done, right? It works. And, maybe that's a secret weapon. So maybe you've got something like, I'm going to have just a little hit of this pickle juice, and I'm going to run like the wind today, because I had my pickle juice. So maybe like rocket fuel, it could work. Cool. Anything else? So I can, yes.
have you ever heard of baking soda?
Baking soda, yes. So baking soda is a bicarbonate to buffer acidity. So a marathon, is this an anaerobic event or an aerobic event? A marathon. It is 99%, 99.9% aerobic. Because if you are anaerobic in a marathon, other than that last 100 meters, you're in big trouble. So people doing these, just like creatine phosphate, people doing this high intense, very anaerobic type event, 400 meters on the track, 50-meter freestyle in the pool, all in, right? All anaerobic, all acidity, so yeah, they'll load with baking soda, because it's legal. I mean, yeah, they'll try everything in the books that's not on the WADA banned list to try to get some little advantage. So, but not for, I mean, unless for, you as an individual, you had something that helped you. But for marathon tomorrow, really, I wouldn't see, any purpose outside of like 400, any event, maybe 40 seconds, if you're like Olympic caliber and you want to just, try something that might give you that extra edge. I know people try this stuff, and you can't stop them from trying this stuff, but they do. That's a great question, I think. Have you tried it for a marathon?
No, but I just recently saw something on it, and I haven't tried it.
Yeah, there's no science, there's no real physiologic, there has to be some like pathway that this could make sense. It's not really used in endurance sports. Caffeine, fine. Actually, if you're a coffee drinker, what are you going to drink tomorrow morning for breakfast? Coffee. Yeah, don't not drink coffee because someone told you not to. I'll have my coffee. I'm a coffeeaholic. Or maybe even a little cream if I can find it. Yeah, so don't start drinking coffee if you're not a coffee drinker. So yeah, caffeine probably fine. All good. Well, good. Get a good night's sleep tonight. Invisible Man. Have fun tomorrow. Smile. If you smile, does magic too. So if you're in a bad place, it's just smile at someone through the aid station. It tends to get you out of the hole. All right, well, I'll see you out there. I'll have an Air Force shirt on, so say hi to me and I'll remember you guys. Good luck.